right. Forgive me once again for these awkward intros. I'm not editing, okay? This is a one-take situation. I had an interesting experience after showing you all those socks on the last episode. I think it was the last episode. I then kind of heard a reference to socks on a podcast episode. It was Duncan Trussell talking to the Blesdo guy, the UFO of God man's son. God, this is not getting off to a good start. This is why I write notes, you guys. I don't want to waste your time, so that's why I'm reading notes. But I just wanted to show you. I got another pair of socks, so I had 3 sock experiences in a number of days, and these showed up on my desk with a note from someone saying from a believer, and she didn't know about the other socks. I don't think she even knew about the YouTube channel. This was just a random occurrence, and it just reminded me that synchronicity is going to be one of our topics coming up, because there's a lot of experiencers out there who get caught in these wild synchronistic periods of time. The 11:11 thing for some people, a lot of times it's more specific, but just the repetition of numbers or phrases or signs, and synchronicities can become so heightened that they almost make you feel completely crazy. So we'll get into all that later, but today we're going to talk about telepathy, remote viewing, and psi abilities as it relates to the UFO phenomena. So far, we've been looking at some major events in the UFO history timeline, and honestly, we've barely scratched the surface. But I wanted to provide a little context for everything else we're about to dive into, and it's going to get weird. So I figured starting with some easy to grasp reality would be a good grounding intro, like the news and the government, if you can call UFO abductions and sightings easy to grasp. But anyway, we talked about the sightings in the 40s and 50s and the 60s, as well as things happening in our US government today. So far, I hope it's clear that this topic, which for many years was considered fringe, has been taken very seriously by lots of people and organizations the whole time. It's been studied, written about, and tons of money has gone into the programs, both covert as well as public. There have been efforts to share information over the years made by individuals who have come forward with their own strange experiences. And there has been a long history of disinformation and cover-ups. Today, with the internet, we have an explosion of theories and comments on any little happening or news report, and we have people who have been working for disclosure for years who have pretty big followings but still get ignored by the mass media. With all of these thoughts, opinions, and perspectives, how can anyone really tell what's going on? Is the disinformation effort just morphing and evolving over time? What does it even mean to develop discernment around these things? And what does the path to truth even look like? The more I research, the more conflicting data I find. If I just let myself attach to the stories that feel fearful, maybe I'm just defaulting to the lowest survival mode type thinking. But if I let myself attach to the stories of aliens as saviors or healers, I might be living in a fantasy and missing out on essential truth. It could be a mixed bag, but what does it all mean in relationship to my daily human experience here on Earth? I honestly believe that this complexity is part of what causes people to shut down to the topic as a whole, but I encourage you to stay in this messy soup and stick with it. I think there's a lot of power in holding uncomfortable concepts and giving them time. And I mean lots of time. Keeping a very loose grip on it all, being willing to let things go along the way, and making space for new information, sitting with big questions, sometimes for many years at a time. It's all part of the process. This is a skill we can build, and working with this information is a way to evolve our thinking capabilities. It's a way to create new neural pathways and processes within our own minds, and that's not a waste of time. Discernment is powerful, but it has to be cultivated through careful, consistent effort over time. So, what are some of the conflicting narratives? Well, let's take a look at Stephen Greer. So, I'll be honest, I've always felt a little skeptical of Greer. He's someone who's been working for disclosure for many years, but he has a lot of passion behind everything he says, which strikes me as a little erratic sometimes in comparison to the very cool and analytical types in the field. I often feel skeptical of those who seem to be creating a sort of celebrity persona for themselves in the process of getting information out. But I also recognize that all of this could be present at once. There could be ego in the mix, there could be passion in the mix, and everything he says could also be true. For me, the jury is still out on Greer, and I'm very interested in a lot of what he says, so I take it all in with a grain of salt, as is necessary for so much of this type of content. Stephen Greer is 68 years old today, according to Wikipedia. He is a retired emergency room physician who founded CSETI in 1990, and that's the Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He was trained as a transcendental meditation teacher and developed the CE5 protocol, which is a meditation technique designed to contact and call ETs into a conversation using pure, heartfelt intent and mental clarity. And I'll just say that I don't have a lot of experience with his protocol. I casually tried it a couple times over the last couple days, not in an ideal setting or anything, and I didn't have any results. And I am an experiencer myself, and I have had many paranormal experiences, so I don't think this is a crazy approach. I'm not sure if this is the kind of thing that could really just be an answer for everyone, although I do think there's something to it, probably. So, yeah, check out CE5 and look into that and let me know what you experience with it. His documentary is called Sirius, that's Sirius. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard him talk on the Gaia channel on a series called Disclosure, and there are numerous clips of him online if you want to look him up. So, if you've been with me so far, you'll remember the Betty and Barney Hill abduction story. This is a great story to illustrate the conflicting narratives in the UFO community. While this story did gain a lot of attention, Greer uses this as an example of what he calls a fake abduction. If you go down the rabbit hole, you might learn something about MILABs, which are military abductions. They seem far-fetched, like why the hell would people stage alien abductions? But Greer would argue that this is all a part of a long-term plan to create fear around these others. Playing into our human tendency towards racism and other forms of bigotry, he says that certain powers that be want to continue using money and resources to play war games and take those games out into space. And getting humankind to fear and hate aliens and extra dimensionals is all a part of their plan. He claims that when the mainstream narrative presents new information about craft or whatever, they often say, "We have no idea what this is," but they do. He claims that the tic tacs we've discussed in earlier episodes are man-made and designed to reinforce the notion of a national security risk. He argues that a lot of powerful technologies that could be used for good are being kept under wraps, and it's not hard to go there because we've seen how unhelpful and even evil some of these big powers can be. There's plenty of evidence of good things being kept from the people in order to continue to control us, whether it's information, medicine, or advanced technologies. So it's funny that people online were saying things like, "I don't care if there's aliens unless they can pay my bills," because Greer would argue that there is free energy technology being hidden from us all. It all ties back in. But let's get into the discernment side of all of this. How can a regular Joe become a human lie detector? What does it mean to see through the layers of illusion, and how do psychic abilities come into play around the topic of UFOs, extraterrestrials, and even extra dimensionals? Well, let's take a look at remote viewing. Back in 2011, my own strange experiences were peaking. I was thrown into the deep end and had the choice to sink or swim. I swam, but just barely, like by the grace of the universe. I was thrown a metaphorical life raft and given the opportunity to heal, ground, and study. Had there not been so many resources available to me in the form of books and YouTube videos, I could have very easily lost my mind. And that's why I feel it's important for me to do my little part and give back in this way. People talking about their experiences and building out various frameworks for understanding things that are out of the ordinary is so valuable. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of you content creators and authors and just people I've met in the world who have shared things with me. You're everything. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I might not be here without you. So thank you so much. During that time, I had what some people refer to as a book event. 2 books nearly jumped off the shelf at me and were exactly what I needed to move forward in my life. And these occurred at separate times, not like at the same moment. I found them each on their own. And there were also so many other like videos and books and things that helped me on my way. But these 2 that really continued to kind of come back around. One is Kundalini Tantra by Swami Satyananda Saraswati. And this one, obviously, Kundalini in the title, talks a lot about the awakening process through the lens of the Kundalini experience. I found it really helpful for framing my own experience. And then the other was My Big Toe by Tom Campbell, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So TOE stands for Theory of Everything. I've read his entire book, which can also be purchased as 3 books, and you can also download it. I think you can still get it for free as a Google like PDF or whatever. This is the book. This edition, it's beefy. It contains all 3 books. His book is broken into 3 sections, so if you order it online, you might see them separated out, or you can get them all together. And this is 100 or 820 pages before the index, and I've read every word of it. There's a YouTube channel for Tom that I'll link below, and there are so many videos, interviews, and fireside chats that you can listen to in order to develop your own opinion of his work. For me, this was everything I needed to move forward on my path of understanding the nature of reality and consciousness, and it continues to provide a helpful framework for all things paranormal and even spiritual. In April 2017, I traveled to New York to hear Tom lecture at a college in Brooklyn, and I did that just so that I could get the vibe. I wanted to use my own human lie detector to determine whether or not I felt any falseness in him or excessive ego or just anything else that might dilute the work. And he passed my test. I thought he was very grounded and humble. I got a picture with him and his wife Pamela because I'm like a fangirl, and I had a great time. It was just like a tiny lecture in a small room in a college. It was nothing fancy, but he did talk a lot about remote viewing, and we did some exercises that day as well. So I love Tom Campbell, and in a way, he says a lot of the same things that various spiritual leaders have said throughout history about the illusions of reality. But he uses new terms so that they have less of the connotations or energies around them that can distract from the essence of what he's trying to communicate. He often refers to reality as a simulation, but he's not talking about it in the way that the simulation theory people are. He's not saying that we are in a computer. He's just using it as a metaphor. And in his model, consciousness is both the computer and what's being computed. Meanwhile, meaning that we are all consciousness and everything we perceive is consciousness as well. And he kind of describes it as like these nesting layers, physical matter reality is where we're focused, and that is a subset of a larger reality system, which he refers to as non-physical matter reality. And it goes on and on from there. I decided to ask our AI friend ChatGPT for a little summary of Tom's work, and I really liked what it gave me, so I'm going to read you that right now. This is the summary of Tom's theory by ChatGPT. Consciousness is fundamental. According to Campbell, consciousness is the primary building block of reality. Everything exists within and is derived from consciousness. Virtual reality. The physical universe, including our everyday reality, is like a virtual reality simulation created by a larger consciousness system. It is a digital-like simulation where we, as individuated units of consciousness, IUOCs, could think of that as a soul maybe, or something along those lines, interact and learn through experiences. Evolution of consciousness. The purpose of our existence is to evolve our consciousness through the choices we make. We are here to learn, grow, and increase our capacity for love and understanding. Individual and collective consciousness. Each individual is a unique unit of consciousness, IUOC, exploring and evolving through experiences. However, all individual consciousness is interconnected, forming a larger collective consciousness. Free will and decision space. We have free will and make choices within the limits of our decision space. Our choices affect our personal growth and influence the larger collective consciousness. Love and fear. Campbell emphasizes the significance of love as the path to spiritual growth and understanding. Fear and ego hinder spiritual progress, while love and compassion promote it. Reincarnation and afterlife. Campbell's model includes the idea of reincarnation and the continuation of consciousness after physical death. The process of transitioning to an afterlife reality is based on an individual's state of consciousness and level of understanding. Non-physical realms. Besides the physical universe, there are non-physical realms and dimensions inhabited by other entities and intelligences. These realms may be accessible through altered states of consciousness. And the larger consciousness system, or LCS. This is the overarching intelligent and conscious system that governs the virtual reality simulation. It may be seen as an evolving and self-learning system. And then practical applications. Campbell's model has practical implications for personal growth, understanding consciousness, and exploring the nature of reality. It encourages open-minded exploration and a scientific approach to metaphysical concepts. And in conjunction with all of this kind of philosophical or spiritual content, he has a scientific side to the theory. There are actual experiments that are building off of the sort of the quantum physics famous experiments. He's kind of taking those a step further to help gather evidence to support his theory, which is that the reality we live in is probabilistic. That's the word he uses, but basically that from any given point in time, which in his theory we are operating from within a linear time rule set in physical matter reality. So from my point in time right now, not only do I have a series of choices in front of me, which is just limited by whatever the factors are that are limiting my choices, and each one of those choices that I make can lead me to a new set of choices, but also when it comes to people reading the future, so to speak, what they're doing is from this current moment, they are accessing data in the database of reality, of consciousness, and there's like often a high probability of things that are coming closer to us on the timeline. So like, for example, if I took these socks and I say, I'm going to let go of these socks, what do we think is going to happen? They're going to fall. There's a high probability that they're going to fall. And there they went. Now there's maybe there's like the tiniest possibility that like at that moment an earthquake could happen and I don't let go of the socks, or a bird swoops in and intercepts the socks. But that's so low that it looks like I could read the future and say those socks are going to drop, because there's so much data in the current moment suggesting that that's what will happen. So anyway, hopefully that helps to understand one tiny aspect of this huge theory. And even just this little summary has a lot to unpack. And I wanted to bring this into the conversation because what this framework gives us is a way to understand layers of reality that exist beyond our physical reality. And it's a totally elegant model. I want to continue to talk about Tom Campbell's work in future episodes because there's just so much that I find valuable and absolutely clarifying, but today I want to focus on the telepathic aspects of all of this and the path to a clearer intuition, or you could say strengthening the power of discernment so that we can apply our own mental clarity to complex issues like UFOs, aliens, and extra dimensionals, and whatever the government is up to. So Tom Campbell's work is rooted in practical applications. Once you start grasping his theory, the next step is all your personal journey of gathering and analyzing your own experiential data. He's very much all about the idea that the proof is in the pudding. It has nothing to do with trying to get people to believe him and everything to do with setting people up to do their own testing. I could literally sit and discuss his theory for days because it has implications in every realm of reality and is so solid. But for now, let's link back to remote viewing. And this is relevant because not only is it where Tom got his start, but it's another area of study that has drawn the interest of the government and other secret programs. So continuing down our little timeline, let's look at the 70s and talk about remote viewing. I'm sure many of you have seen Stranger Things, and this is a great example of remote viewing. 11, the girl in the show, is able to use her mind to access information from remote locations, some of which are extra dimensional in a sense. And if you look into remote viewing programs, you'll see that a lot of interest bubbled up in the US around this in the 1970s. So I did go to ChatGPT again for a summary of remote viewing, and this is what the AI had to say. Remote viewing is a phenomenon in which an individual known as a remote viewer uses their mental faculties to perceive or see distant or unseen targets without being physically present at the location. It is often considered a form of extrasensory perception, ESP, or psychic ability. In a typical remote viewing session, the remote viewer is given a set of coordinates or a target description, which is intended to represent a specific location, event, or object that is hidden from the viewer. The target could be a physical location on Earth, an event in the past or future, or even an object hidden in a sealed container. The remote viewer then attempts to access information about the target using their intuition, psychic abilities, or by entering an altered state of consciousness. They might use various techniques such as visualization, meditation, or mental impressions to gather information about the target. The information obtained through remote viewing is often described as impressions, images, feelings, or thoughts that the viewer receives. These impressions are then recorded and later compared to the actual target to determine the accuracy of the remote viewing session. Remote viewing gained popularity in the 1970s and 80s when it was studied and used by various government agencies, including the United States military and intelligence services, for potential espionage and intelligence gathering purposes. While some claim significant success with remote viewing, it remains a controversial and debated topic in the scientific community. I mean, to some people, I guess. I think it's pretty obvious that this is a real thing to a lot of us. Anyway, during the 1970s and 1980s, the US and the Soviet Union were engaged in the Cold War, a period of intense geopolitical rivalry and espionage. Both countries were actively exploring various unconventional methods to gain an edge over each other, and one of these methods included psychic phenomena, specifically remote viewing. The Soviet Union's psychic spying program was reportedly active during the 1970s and beyond, and it involved training individuals with claimed psychic abilities to conduct remote viewing operations. These individuals were often referred to as psychic spies or psychic warriors. Both the US and Soviet programs claimed some level of success in their remote viewing experiments, but the overall effectiveness and reliability of remote viewing as an intelligence gathering tool remained highly controversial and contested within the intelligence community. In the United States, the Stargate project was eventually declassified and made public in the 1990s, leading to increased scrutiny and debate surrounding the use of psychic abilities for intelligence purposes. It's worth noting that while there were individuals within these programs who claimed to have had successful remote viewing experiences, the scientific community generally remained skeptical of the reliability and scientific validity of remote viewing as a viable intelligence gathering tool. As a result, both countries eventually scaled back or disbanded their respective psychic spying programs. Or at least that's what they said. So this looks a lot like what Stephen Greer was saying about lies like, we have this stuff, but we have no idea what it is. Is that true? Do you really not know what it is, or do you just want us to not think too hard about it? And did you really stop studying psychic abilities, or do you want us to just accept that story and move on with our lives? Anyway, Tom Campbell was a young astrophysicist working for NASA at one point, and only in his 30s, and he was in his 30s when he and Dennis Menerick went to the Monroe Institute in Virginia to do science around this phenomena of astral travel and out-of-body experiences with Bob Monroe. They agreed to run experiments and gather data in exchange for instruction on how to have these experiences themselves. And after about 30 years of study, Tom wrote his theory of everything. In terms of major names in remote viewing, you'll definitely want to look up Ingo Swann. He's the one who basically coined the term, or he said remote viewing in a psychic session, and then they adopted that term. Russel Targ, Harold Puthoff, and Joe McMoneagle. There was a lot going on at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, around remote viewing. And when I was at Contact in the Desert in 2023, there was a really interesting panel on remote viewing, and I saw Tracy Garbett Dolan. She's Richard Dolan's wife. I also got to chat with her later on, which was pretty cool, and ask her some questions about remote viewing. I got to hear on that panel Paul H. Smith, JJ and Desiree Hertok, and Anthony Peake, and the host of that panel was Alan Steinfeld. So these are all people you can look up if you want to dig around on this topic. Now, the thing about remote viewing is that while it is verifiable, like you can prove it, it's also not perfect every time. Even the most powerful remote viewers who get things right again and again can make mistakes or get confused every once in a while. And so it's a tricky thing to take remote viewing data as the only source of information on a subject, but I do think it's valuable in combination with other data. For example, a famous remote viewer might be able to tell military intelligence that there is a bomb in a certain place and the soldiers go there and it's true. And then that same remote viewer tells them that there are aliens on the moon and they don't like that, and now he's labeled as insane or just not accurate. Now, maybe he was right, maybe he interpreted the data wrong. There's a lot of questions when it comes to this stuff, so if you can't go and verify what has been gathered through remote viewing, you just don't know. So remote viewing is all about accessing and then interpreting data. And when it comes to the interpretation side of things, we can only interpret what we already have a framework for understanding. So we're often communicating back in metaphor. This is why when people are practicing remote viewing, they're trained to stay very vague at first and just report the characteristics of what they're viewing instead of trying to determine what it is. So like, if they were viewing a book, they might get anything from it's squarish, it's white, it's got some red, there's some little curving shapes. That could be the words, you know. There are some straight lines. There could be a smell, a texture, or any other general feeling about it. Some remote viewers might get the content of the book. And it's only when you put all that together and later see like, oh, all these things did describe a book. It's kind of like the blind men and the elephant, if you've heard that story, but I won't go into that. So today there are people remote viewing other planets. People are using this ability to have telepathic communications with beings outside of physical reality. And there are probably secret programs continuing to study this technique. I can't imagine any reality where they started down this path and then just decided to stop. That's just me. There's just too much evidence that this is a real and powerful tool, and the cool part is that technically anyone can do it. The thing is, just like becoming a concert pianist, most people could do that, but not everyone will choose to dedicate themselves to the practice required to actually reach that level. So if you're interested in exploring your own potential, when it comes to remote viewing or any other psychic abilities, I definitely recommend My Big Toe by Tom Campbell for just a beginning framework understanding for all these things. You could check out Robert Monroe, Ingo Swann has books, or just Google remote viewing. There are even apps that have been created with little games to help you practice those skills. All right, that's a lot for today. I want to leave it here and just say in summary that all that we're learning about and considering when it comes to UFOs, aliens, or extra dimensional beings leads us down the inevitable path of needing to grow our understanding of reality. You can even look at some of the comments that were made in this hearing recently about extra dimensionals and a little bit of confusion around whether or not what we're dealing with is all happening within physical matter reality, or maybe it's outside of it, or maybe it's both. We don't know. So we kind of need to all be training our own minds to tune into the truth. And there are many practices available to us to continue to cultivate that ability within ourselves. And hopefully we can all kind of like put our minds together and figure this thing out. A big part of learning about a bigger picture is just the personal work of developing intuition, keeping an open mind, skeptical but open-minded outlook. Scientific research is wonderful and very important. Sharing experiences can help to build our understanding of what's going on. And no matter what, at the end of the day, if all you want to do is focus what's going on in front of you, your daily experiences, and that's it, well, according to people like Tom Campbell, that's what it's all about. Have you ever heard the saying that after enlightenment, there's the laundry? Or before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. This is to say that all this stuff is cool and mind-blowing and really amazing to learn about, but we still need to show up and live out our human lives. There is a sacredness to be found in every daily task, and just because we are traveling to the edges of our imaginations and consciousness doesn't mean that that's the only way to peace and understanding. And it doesn't mean we get to treat people badly, you know? So I'm going to continue talking about all of the things weird and strange, and also I'm going to keep my house clean and my mind calm, and I'm going to focus on the love found in every relationship I have, and I'm going to feed my dog, and I'm going to go to work. Until next time, plenty of links below to keep you going, and please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you want to be notified of the next video, and thank you so much for tuning in to Shocks Talks. This is really fun. I love thinking about these things, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I have to say.